सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे
निंदा ना करे के नीरे निंदा ना करे के नीरे बाज काज मना निश्चल राखे
बाज काज मना निश्चल राखे
धन धन जननी तेनी रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही
समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी
समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी पर स्त्री जेने मात रे
पर स्त्री जेने मात रे
जेवा थकी असत्य न बोले जीवा थकी असत्य न बोले पर धन न बजाले हाथ रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही
माया व्यापे नहीं जेने
मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जेना मन मारे
दृढ़ वैराग जेना मन मारे
राम नाम शु ताली लागी राम नाम शु ताली लागे सकल ते
Thank you so much for your kind attention. I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences of Raffles University, I welcome you. I also welcome you on behalf of SOHSS Chakra, Circle for Creative Co-Learning, Vishwanidham Center for Asian Blossoming, Puducherry and Chennai, and Raise Global Foundation. At the outset, let me express my sincere appreciation for the honor to welcome Honorable Speaker Dr. Christian Bartolf, Gandhi Information Center, Berlin, Germany. Dear participant, kindly mute yourself so that we can avoid disruption. Yes. I extend my warm welcome to our Chief Patron, Honorable Dr. Justice Meena Vigomber, former Chief Justice of Rajasthan High Court, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Raffles University, Divakar Kohli, Professor Kumar Giri from Madras Development Institute and Executive Co-Nurturer of Vishwanidham Center for Asian Blossoming, dear friends, SOHSS Chakra family, viewers on Zoom platform and also Facebook platform, listeners, and all my respected friends. It's a great honor for me to introduce and welcome the chief guest of this timely, beautiful evening, Dr. Christian Bartolf, a famous Gandhian thinker. He is an educational and political scientist, closely collaborating with the Free University Berlin, and since November 1993, president of Gandhi Information Center, Research and Education for Nonviolence, a society of a education of benefit to public based in Berlin, Germany, and curator of more than 20 exhibitions on nonviolent resistance for the Berlin and Tiwari Museum on Gandhi, Tolstoy, Thoreau, Ruskin, Huxley. He extensively researched Mahatma Gandhi's correspondence with contemporaries and published several books, biography, monographs, articles on various national and international journals. So, sir is a very distinguished scholar. We welcome you, sir. Let me begin. Let me also give a kind of brief introduction to our SOHSS Chakra. SOHSS Chakra, co-learning circle of self and mutual study. It is an initiative of studying and learning together self, culture, societies, and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking, new social movements, cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chitranjan Das, a creative soul and a creative thinker from Odisha, and many others around the world. We also present our own writing and reflect upon our creativity together. We also invite seekers from different fields of life to share with us their lives, sadhana, vision, and a struggle for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogue. We meet every Sunday or sometimes on Wednesday. Now we are nurturing this dialogue in collaboration with the School of Humanities and Social Science of Raffles University and Raise Global Foundation, USA. Today, we have a very relevant topic of discussion, that is Gandhi and Fascism. Fascism is not simply a political condition. It is to be understood as threat to humanity, threat to society, so far as the conception of this concept is concerned. Lenin goes on to locate fascism historically in a kind of war ideology that came to power in Italy, and whose advocates argued that the country should be governed by heroes of World War I. George L. Moss, in his article Genesis of Fascism, where he said fascism has been a neglected movement. The fascist revolution cannot be understood if we see it merely in negative terms or judge it entirely by the dominance which National Socialism achieved over it by late 1930. We need to redefine this concept, explaining fascism in terms of ethnic cleansing, dark side of nationalism, fascism in the age of global capitalism, fascism in modern China, political disorganization of post-Lenin's termed as left-wing fascism, Will's liberal fascism, Islamofascism, eco-fascism, so and so forth. So, of course, with Gandhian way of thinking, we can understand fascism in a more deep sense. So, with this introduction, now I would like to invite Professor Ananta Giri sir to kindly moderate the session.
Sat Sri Akal. And Sat Sri Akal to all friends, including Christian, who with his hat becomes an inspiring seeker of truth, and Sat and Guru, and it is a joy to be with Christian today, and we are grateful to Christian for continuing to travel with us, work with us in this very difficult aspect of our history and the present condition. And we are very inspired, encouraged by the co-presence of many friends, especially Dr. Carl Julius Roentgen, a very deep traveler with Gandhi and emancipatory movement. His book on Ekta Parishad in India is an inspiring treatise for us, gift to us, and also co-presence of Payal, Dr. Payal Chakrabarti Chattopadhyay, and also many friends, Anand, our Swadhyaya Chakra friends. So fascism is a many-sided phenomena, and it is a many-sided movement. And some of its dimensions are a kind of exclusionary nationalism, exclusionary social categorization built on violence, and also aggression and authoritarianism. Now, if beauty, dignity, and dialogue is part of being human, then fascism, it destroys dignity, and also it destroys dialogue. It's very difficult to have dialogue. And also in terms of beauty, the fascists have their own sense of beauty. It is a beauty of aggression and annihilation, like this whole aesthetics of strength. And again, here I'm reminded of the discussion I had with Christian many years ago when we are traveling on the way to the Vansi conference, and this whole entanglement of beauty and terror. So if beauty means, as also during the heyday of German Renaissance and the Bauhaus movement, the beauty is a way to create beauty for everybody, social aesthetics. But in fascism, it is the beauty of the strong annihilating the weak, that kind of annihilatory beauty and aesthetics. So today we see that projection of one-dimensional strength, the projection of the strength which is not accompanied by a minimal sense of human vulnerability. And here I'm reminded of one sentence that former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, he said that when, last year when people were struggling in the United States against the corona pandemic, against the killing of innocent lives, black lives. Now, one elderly person was fighting against it, he was protesting against it. And the police pushed him in such a way that he fell to the ground. And commenting on that, then President Trump commented, oh, this elderly man had gone there and he got pushed so that his image would come in the television camera, and it was his own way of being pushed and make himself visible. And then Governor Cuomo made this very important reflection. He said that what is happening here? An elderly man is pushed to the ground, and instead of empathizing it, the president of a country is finding motive into it. So this is an example of the kind of aesthetics of strength, which is not accompanied by a minimal sense of human vulnerability. Because each one of us in that condition, with our bare body, we are as vulnerable as everybody else. So I think that fascism of strength, it takes us away from our common humanity. So with this very basic offering, so it's a joy for me to invite Dr. Christian Bartolf, our friend and co-worker of many years, which seems like an eternal journey, and many things are waiting to be born with our journey together, to help us on this theme of Gandhi and Fascism, please. Christian.
Thank you so much for your invitation. And I would like to remind our dialogue partners today that we started on 29th of August 2021 with a lecture on Gandhi and Hitler. And I give you the link to this document. And this is a follow-up. And I would even suggest a follow-up, another follow-up, explicitly about Gandhi and anti-Semitism. So maybe you note it down for your agenda, because this is certainly necessary. But today, I think we should really focus on what is called fascism. And also remember from our analytical point of view, what the characteristics of fascist regimes are. Somehow we can go back to the definition of Friedrich and Brzezinski with respect to totalitarian regimes even. They marked 5 characters or 6 characteristics: elaborate guiding ideology, single mass party, typically led by a dictator, a system of terror using such instruments as violence and secret police, a monopoly on weapons, a monopoly on the means of communication, a central direction and control of the economy through state planning. And French analyst Raymond Aron added 5 criteria. First, a one-party state, where one party has a monopoly on all political activity. Second, a state ideology upheld by the ruling party that is given status as the only authority. That's the state ideology. Third is the state information monopoly that controls mass media for distribution of official truth. Fourth is the state-controlled economy with major economic entities under the control of the state. And the fifth is the ideological terror that turns economic or professional actions into crimes. violators are exposed to prosecution and to ideological persecution. But we should also remember the root of the term fascism from Italy, because this is actually what I would like to lecture about, Gandhi's encounter with fascism firsthand in Italy, 1931. This will be the starting point of my lecture. So the Italian term fascismo is derived from fascio, meaning bundle of sticks, ultimately from the Latin word fascis. This was the name given to political organizations in Italy known as fasci, groups similar to guilds or syndicates. According to Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini's own account, the fasces of revolutionary action were founded in Italy in 1950. In 1919, Mussolini founded the Italian Fasces of Combat in Milan, which became the National Fascist Party 2 years later. The fascists came to associate the term with the ancient Roman fasces or fascio, Vittorio, a bundle of rods tied around an axe, an ancient Roman symbol of the authority of the civic magistrate, carried by his lictors, which could be used for corporal and capital punishment at his command. So this is the axe as the symbol for the power to command corporal or capital punishment. So we should remember this symbolism. You find similar symbols in the phalange, 5 arrows joined together by a yoke, not to mention the swastika symbol of the Nazis. But I would like to start my lecture with going back to Gandhi's visit in Italy. And he was warned by Romerlin, as I mentioned last time already, that he might be instrumentalized by fascist propaganda. So now the method I apply is just to look at Gandhi quotes on fascism and Mussolini and try to interpret, try to understand his mind. Maybe you can at least ask some questions or give some focus on associations of Gandhi, which might be revealing to us, just to understand better, much better than before. So Gandhi wrote in his retrospect on his Italian visit in December 1931, "Chance threw Rome in my way, and I was able to see something of that great and ancient city and Mussolini, the unquestioned dictator of Italy. And what would not I have given to be able to bow my head before the living image at the Vatican of Christ crucified. It was not without a wrench that I could tear myself away from that scene of living tragedy. I saw there at once that nations, like individuals, could only be made through the agony of the cross and in no other way. Joy comes not out of infliction of pain on others, but out of pain voluntarily borne by oneself." So this is an interesting association. It seems to be that Gandhi just referred to Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, without question, briefly, but actually a complete passage as a commentary on fascism. But why were people fascinated by fascists? Why was Gandhi somehow fascinated? Because you find this in a retrospect letter to Romain Rolland on December 20, 1931, from board the ship of his return from Brindisi to India. And Gandhi explains his fascination. Mussolini is a riddle to me. Many of his reforms attract me. He seems to have done much for the peasant class. I admit an iron hand is there, but as violence is the basis of Western society, Mussolini's reforms deserve an impartial study. His care of the poor, his opposition to super-urbanization, his efforts to bring about coordination between capital and labor seem to me to demand special attention. I would like you to enlighten me on these matters. My own fundamental objection is that these reforms are compulsory, but it is the same in all democratic institutions. What strikes me is that behind Mussolini's implacability is a desire to serve his people. Even behind his emphatic speeches, there is a nucleus of sincerity and of passionate love of his people. It also seems to me that the majority of Italian people love the iron government of Mussolini. So this was not the last word, of course, but this is an interesting starting point, isn't it? Now, we remember the photos of Gandhi meeting children educated in fascist uniforms. So in retrospect, Gandhi said, I was in Rome and Mussolini's officials took pride in showing the graceful maneuvers of the little children who were being taught all naval tricks. This was in 1946 when he said so. The same year when he wrote, look at Italy. Garibaldi was a great man. He brought deliverance to Italy. And Mussolini did make her look great. But where is she today? Look at Japan. Look at Germany. The very violence which brought them to the pinnacle of power has raised them to the ground. And has not the atom bomb proved the futility of all violence? And yet we are crazy enough to think that we can win Swaraj by breaking a few skulls and destroying property, which, after all is said and done, is our own. I'm sure out of this orgy of violence, the people will learn the lesson of non-violence. Now, let me return to my usual custom to commemorate the United Nations International Days. We are between the International Day for Democracy, shortly before the International Day of Peace on 21st of September. We should observe the International Day to abolish all nuclear weapons, and not to forget 2nd of October, International Day of Nonviolence, which has been decided by the United Nations General Assembly in 2007. And yes, actually all what I'm saying now is focusing on democracy, peace, abolition of weapons of mass destruction, and of course, nonviolence. So let us continue to listen to Gandhi. What did he think about these war criminals? Hitler and Mussolini. So he was asked by, actually in an interview by Ralph Coniston of the Collier's Weekly, before the San Francisco conference opened on April 25, 1945, he was asked, "What about the war criminals?" Gandhi responds, "What is a war criminal? Was not war itself a crime against God and humanity? And therefore, were not all those who sanctioned, engineered, and conducted wars war criminals? War criminals are not confined to the Axis powers alone. Roosevelt and Churchill are no less war criminals than Hitler and Mussolini. Hitler was Great Britain's sin, in inverted commas, Great Britain's sin. Hitler is only an answer to British imperialism. And this I say in spite of the fact that I hate Hitlerism and its anti-Semitism. England, America, and Russia have all of them got their hands dyed more or less red, not merely Germany and Japan. The Japanese have only proved themselves to be apt pupils of the West. They have learned at the feet of the West and beaten it at its own game. And then the question, what would you see accomplished at San Francisco? And this is the message of Gandhi. Parity among all nations, the strongest and the weakest. The strong should be the servants of the weak, not their masters or exploiters. So here we have a sense that Gandhi perceived fascism in the light of his and his fellow countrymen and women experience with imperialism. And as we know, imperialism has a long history back from the British and French to the Spanish and Portuguese and other colonialist powers. Mostly we can learn from the history of imperialism by studying the Spanish imperialism with their distinctions of caste, the racism. This is quite revealing. But let's continue with Gandhi. Actually, it's a matter of choice what I give you to your attention now. I would like to focus for a moment on the role of women in Gandhi's alternative concept, his hope that women might expose a degree of nonviolent resistance which is melting the heart of dictators. So this proof of this is the fact that Gandhi drafted a reply to British women's appeal in 1941, which was signed by Sarojini Naidu, Rameshwari Nehru, Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, Amrit Kaur, Rani Lakshmibai Rajwade, Amu Swaminathan, and Radha Subbaroyan on behalf of the All India Women's Conference. And this text is quite interesting. As we see the reality, it is this. It is a war between the British Empire and Nazis and fascists for world domination, meaning in effect, exploitation of the non-European races. We cannot be in love with Nazism and fascism, but we may not be expected to be in love with British imperialism. Now, perhaps you will understand why we as women are against all war. Women's part is just now to stand up for truth and non-violence as against the untruth and violence which surround us. And this implicitly refers back to a very interesting speech Gandhi gave in Rome, December 13, 1931, And there you find this, to the point, this exaggeration which makes visible the power of nonviolence, the capacity just to challenge contemporaries and followers, so-called followers, to make their own experiments with truth. And so Gandhi's speech at the women's meeting in Rome is in Rome. This is the Rome of fascist Italy, not to forget, which is amazing because here Gandhi exaggerates his statement that he is not a soldier of war, but a soldier of peace, which he gave, the statement he gave in Switzerland. He called himself a soldier of peace. So here you have another term which is opposing the concept of war. It is the notion of non-violent war. So in his speech at the women's meeting in Rome, Gandhi described the beauty of non-violent war is that women can play the same part in it as men. In a violent war, the women have no such part in it as men. In a violent war, the women have no such privilege. And the Indian women played a more effective part in our last non-violent war than men. The reason is simple. Non-violent war calls into play suffering to the largest extent. And who can suffer more purely and nobly than women? The women in India tore down the Buddha and came forward to work for the nation. They saw that the country demanded something more than their looking after their homes. They manufactured contraband salt. They picketed foreign cloth shops and liquor shops and tried to wean both the seller and the customer from both. At late hours in the night, they pursued the drunkards to their dens with courage and charity in their hearts. They marched to jails and they sustained lathi blows as few men did. If the women of the West will try to vie with men in becoming brutes, they have no lesson to learn from the women of India. They will have to cease to take delight in sending their husbands and sons to kill people and congratulate them on their valor. This is remarkable, this example of women bravery, and you see here also a combination of nonviolent resistance and social reform, and then the clear anti-violence stand. And another specific distinction between German fascism to the fascists in, let me say, Italy or Spain is not only the profound anti-Semitism, but also this extreme mobilization of women for the fascist cause and the war purpose. So here you have you can say, the counterpoint. You have the real vision of the immense role of women for nonviolent change. When I mentioned in another quote Garibaldi, we should not forget that Gandhi was quite interested in studying Garibaldi, Mazzini, Italian history, nationalism of the 19th century. But I will not go deeper into this. This should be interesting for historians, particularly in comparison with other nationalists in other countries. So another very interesting aspect is the idea that actually there was a kind of comparison possible in Gandhi's point of view, where on the one hand his experience in South Africa, which are not well understood nowadays, I would say. It is not well understood that the South Africa Gandhi experienced was traumatized by massacres, civil war, and genocidal crimes against humanity from many colonialist powers. And it is not just a matter of exploitation through this indentured labor system, the semi-slavery, which has been made perfect in a way. And also this forced labor element has been a role model for Hitler and the Nazis in their concentration camp system. But also in their forced labor system for war prisoners, for example, Russian war prisoners who were killed by forced labor. But also in this courage to find the way of non-violent resistance against the British colonialist power after the Boer Wars. And here you have a very interesting statement of Gandhi, how to combat Hitlerism in this aspect. So it's a statement of 1940. And this is interesting because it describes a cartoon. You know, Gandhi was portrayed in cartoons. And some cartoons were to the point. They were revealing some hidden truth. And now Gandhi refers to one of these cartoons. Whatever Hitler may ultimately prove to be, we know what Hitlerism has come to mean. It means naked, ruthless force reduced to an exact science and worked with scientific precision. In its effect, it becomes almost irresistible. In the early days of Satyagraha, when it was still known as passive resistance, the Star of Johannesburg, it's a newspaper, stirred by the sight of a handful of Indians, wholly unarmed and incapable of organized violence, even if they wished it, pitting themselves against an overwhelmingly armed government, had a cartoon in which the latter was depicted as a steamroller representing irresistible force, and passive resistance was depicted as an elephant, unmoved and comfortably planting himself in his seat. This was marked, immovable force. The cartoonist had a true insight into the duel between the irresistible and the immovable forces. It was then a stalemate. The sequel we know. What was depicted and appeared to be irresistible was successfully resisted by the immovable force of Satyagraha. Call it suffering without retaliation. What became true then can be equally true now. Hitlerism will never be defeated by counter-Hitlerism. It can only breed superior Hitlerism raised to nth degree. What is going on before our eyes is a demonstration of the futility of violence, as also of Hitlerism. And referring in his article, Nazism in its nakedness, and Gandhi referred to the belief that no non-violent action may have no effect on Hitler or the Germans, whom he has turned into so many robots, quotation. Non-violent action, Gandhi responded, non-violent action, if it is adequate, must influence Hitler and easily the duped Germans. No man can be turned into a permanent machine. Immediately the dead weight of authority is lifted from his head, he begins to function normally. Which is, by the way, a very interesting description of opportunism also. So, and not to forget all the Nazis in high offices after, in the post-war Germany, at least the Western part. And not to forget the tactics of opportunists to try to gain profits from any regime, whatever. Conformism, which was so much exposed by great artists like Pier Paolo Pasolini, for example, who also give us a legacy of the working of fascism in his last great movie, Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, according to Marquis de Sade. Because actually we are speaking about regimes of political sadism, organized sadism. And of course, as Ananta mentioned, no respect of human dignity and no empathy for the weak, for the suffering. But we know that Gandhi always had the hope to melt even the stoniest heart, like that of a dictator, by organized nonviolence. And there will be much more to add if you let me speak a second time today. So thank you first for your attention, and I think this should be sufficient for the start. And you might come back even to the key document of Gandhi, which has been on debate for the past years, his letters to Hitler, particularly the one which is authorized on December 24. This is Holy Eve, by the way, 1940, and which can also be read as addressed to the British imperialist government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vielen Dank aus meinem Herz, lieber Christian. And what a deep journey with these themes and Gandhi's reflections, and we see the many aspects, many dimensions of history and truth here. So now let us join Christian in nurturing some of these ideas and challenges. To initiate the conversation, so I wish to request Dr. Roebke to kindly share some thoughts. Dr. Roebke, please.
Thank you for inviting me. Nice to talk to you. Well, I think it was a very good start. I didn't listen to the first part you gave about Hitler and Nazism. So today you started with his going to Rome and first meeting Romain Rolland, who told him not to go. And I always wondered, why did Gandhi not listen to Romain Rolland and went to Italy and met Mussolini? I think he was very much disappointed with Romain Rolland, and he was most disappointed that he did not manage to persuade Romain Rolland not to go to Moscow, because as fond as Gandhi was of Mussolini and wanted to see it, he was not feeling compassionate for Mussolini, but he wanted to know for himself. Whereas with Romain Rolland, it was already a love affair. And Gandhi was always very open. So it is very difficult to understand why he wanted to know Hitler, why he wanted to know Mussolini. He was stubborn, wanted to know and have his own judgment, whereas others always follow somebody and love it and go ahead. And so this was very clearly shown also by the quotes you had from Gandhi. Thank you for this nice collection, and thank you.
So vielen Dank, lieber Julius, Dr. Zaibke. Thank you. As always, you are pointing to the very essence of matter. So now, Gyan Luigi, please.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I would say that as regards the violence which was present in Italy in the 20s and of course in the 30s too, I think that the factor which Mussolini, unfortunately for us, understood very well was the preparation to violence and the implementation of violence, of the culture of violence and of prepotence, of arrogance and so on, which was which had become a common ground in Italy through the First World War. That is, the campaign of nationalism and of violence and of arrogance against the enemy, which was a common ground during the years of the war, were immediately exploited by Mussolini thereafter, that is, immediately after the end of the First World War. We could say perhaps even that as regards the status of mind of violence, Mussolini had a great intuition, unfortunately, because he understood that this status of mind of demonization of enemy, of the finding of the enemy, of a new enemy, of new enemies, which was a common constant of his politics, could be maintained in spite of the fact that the war was over. And I would add this as regards Mussolini, that he was very acute, very intelligent, unfortunately, when he decided to change his own position, because Mussolini was against the war, against the beginning of war for Italy, that is the intervention, up to a certain point, and then immediately when he understood, only a few months before the war, when he understood that a position of intervention in the war for Italy could bring advantage for him, he changes his mind immediately. But I would say that his politics of violence is really a prosecution of the ideology which was common in Italy during the years of the war, and that he, unfortunately, I repeat, unfortunately, of course, he was very able to understand the methods in which this condition of war condition for the minds, for the mental identity of the Italians, could have been brought forward through the years after the war, and in spite of the fact that the war was over. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gianluigi. Mucho gracias. And one thought that we can nurture during our conversation is, for example, intellectuals like the historian Benedict Croce, and he was, taken seriously. Tagore also met him. I do not know whether Gandhi met Croce or not. But another great philosopher from Italy or Spain, I'm just remembering, Ortega Gasset. And Gasset wrote the book called The Revolt of the Masses, which was a critique of the collectivist and the annihilation of individuals. And in a way that has a satyagraha kind of resonance. So as we move ahead, maybe both Christian and Gianluigi can tell us a little later about it. So we have Saji with us. In the meantime, those friends who like to share some thoughts, you kindly indicate in the chat box, and I request Randhir to kindly take a lead. So we would listen to Saji, and then I am requesting these friends to kindly prepare your thoughts and gift us. After Saji, Dr. Payal, please, and Anand Jaisate, then Devendra and Randhir, and those other friends, and also Minati. These friends kindly get ready, and then those friends who like to speak, please get in the chat box. So Saji, please.
Thank you. Greetings from Shillong. As usual, thank you very much, and also congratulations to Professor Ananta and Mr. Randhir Kumar. Thank you for this occasion. It is the second time we are listening to Dr. Christian Bartolf. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation, and you will be joining us on the 25th. Thank you very much for, again, along with Professor Ananta and also Professor Gianluigi. I missed the first part of your lecture, sir, today, but the second part, very interesting, and it was later I realized that I missed much of it in the first part. Now, having said that, the liberals in Italy, in fascist Italy, the liberals, the minorities, must have been a minority. There were groups, minority groups, who were dominated by the fascists. Now, my small inquiry, humble inquiry, is to know whether the enemy, the word was mentioned by also Professor Gianluigi, I'm borrowing that word. For them, was the enemy the state? Because they seem to have ruled the state with the iron rods in their hand, fascist. Was the ideology their enemy, or the fascist Mussolini himself? And we also have heard from history that Gramsci had already been imprisoned by then, and he had already made a good number of followers by having written in his editorials a lot about the ways of overcoming fascism, which were later not allowed. So he scribbled, and it was interpreted, decoded by his comrades, and printed in the form of present notebooks. I only wish to know, along with Gramsci, were there also other groups who were liberals, minorities, of course they were minorities, who would have influenced to go for a movement against fascism? Were there non-liberal groups then? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Saji. Now, as we move along, I wish to seek a a little clarification from Dr. Royke. Now, Dr. Royke very insightfully mentioned that, that Gandhi didn't listen to Romarola, but maybe Gandhi couldn't persuade Romarola not to go to Moscow. I just want to get a clarification whether I heard him correctly. That means, did Romarola go to Moscow, for example, to study the social experiment and transformation that was underway in Russia? Was he more favorably inclined towards the communist change compared to the fascist? Julius, if you are kindly listening, you can kindly clarify, or you can comment later. Okay, as we are,
Did you ask me?
Yes, I just wanted to get a clarification on this line that I heard, that, and it was that Gandhi didn't listen to Romarola, but Gandhi also could not persuade Romarola to go to Moscow.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know, if Romarola went to Moscow and met with Stalin and wanted to study the social experiment that was underway, and Tagore also had gone to Russia, and he was very fascinated by it. Though his critique of Russian kind of dictatorship came later. So I request you to kindly tell us a little more about, Romarola's journey to Moscow.
So Roland was fascinated with communism before he went, and he was not cured by his visit. He came back and was still fascinated with what he saw, and it became difficult for many intellectuals to accept what he said. Roland had not the format like Gandhi, seeing what really happened, and Gandhiji understood that while he was in Villeneuve together with Roland, that even the dialogue with Roland was much more difficult. Gandhi was so extremely open to what he saw. He was not prejudiced. And what we can learn from this is Roland was really a great personality, but he was a bit prejudiced. And this immediately made it difficult for him to understand also the dangers in communism, like Gandhiji. Yet he just saw what was. He was not prejudiced. And this was very nice, the statements Christian read from the Gandhi's statements. This is so open. We can't understand how we can be so objective to things and to just see what happens. Yeah. State what is good and not follow our heart in a way. That's good to follow the heart, but always mix some of your understanding with it. So I don't know whether it's an answer, but since you asked me.
Thank you so much. And it also points to the perennial cause with all difficulties.
Christian made a point.
Yeah. I really wanted to thank you first for these questions. I also wanted to thank Ananta for organizing an own workshop on Gandhi and Gramsci. It was 1.5 years ago, and I give you the link of my talk then. Also the affinity of Gramsci's concepts with, you can say, seizing power, with the concept of Gandhi somehow. So there is some important reference. So you can listen to that. I give it in the chat. This is for Sajiva Rebeza. And with a reference to Romain Rolland, that's right. I think it is very significant that Gandhi describes the positive aspects he encountered in his meeting with Mussolini and in his understanding of Mussolini in a letter to a communist who is tempted to follow Stalin in a way. And this is also giving us a chance to see what necessary social reforms are to be taken to prevent fascist and Stalinist regimes from seizing power. So this is very important. So if you read it carefully again, this quote, then you find elements of necessary reform, which can also prevent new kinds of fascism, neo-fascism, from seizing power and destroying liberal democracies, by the way. And the other thing is, nobody really understands why Gandhi went to Rome, but you see, this was a chance for him to not only visit the Vatican and understand the context of organized Christianity, and also remember the martyrs of Christianity on the spot at St. Peter's Dome. But also he met the daughter of Tolstoy, who he was indebted to so much. And Tolstoy is the antidote to Stalin, as we know. So the daughter of Tolstoy, you know, Tatiana Zohodina, she drew a painting of, she made a drawing of her father and gave it as a present to Gandhi. So this encounter is so far significant as they both spoke about whom? About Romain Rolland. Romain Rolland, the biographer of Gandhi, as well as Tolstoy. And this talk was critical. The daughter of Tolstoy complained about the you can say, the favorable attitude of Rolland towards Bolshevism. But then I wanted to refer to what Gianluigi Segalerba said. It's very interesting. We shall never forget the first time when chemical weapons were applied in a war was the front between Italy and Austria-Hungary, and the Italians were the victims of chemical warfare, legitimized by the Austrian emperor, Austrian-Hungarian emperor, before the end of the Austria-Hungarian Empire. So there was actually breaking off any war. We can say jus in bello. That means law in the war, and any idea of such, which was fostered by the Hague conferences and the treaties, was destroyed by this activity, this war strategy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So people were actually treated as animals, poisoned by chemicals. And it's an irony of history that Hitler was also a kind of victim. At least this is his propaganda, this is his account, his narrative, a victim of this new warfare in the First World War as an ordinary soldier. But I don't want to continue this. And of course, I want to refer to the fact that in my first lecture, I explicitly and extensively referred to this Italo-Ethiopian war, yes. And I also you can read it. I also transcribed it in the last days. This is a continuation of this ruthless strategy, this unscrupulous war strategy of applying chemical weapons. It's actually even a genocidal strategy which the Italians applied. And we know that Hitler derived his dark inspirations also from the Armenian genocide, and also from the genocide of the Germans in Southwest against Herero and Nama, and the concentration camps against the Boers in South Africa, which were the cause of epidemics in South Africa later on. And these epidemics were also experienced then by Gandhi as a social reformer. I want to say that it is worth getting a fresh look starting from Gandhi's comments on the history of the 20th century, because we shall, on the one hand, avoid any kind of revisionist attitude in a history writing, which is one of the basic pillars of new right-wing ideologists. But on the other hand, we should really have a very clear perception of the cruelty of war strategies and the heritage of so-called totalitarian or fascist, Stalinist regimes. And going back to the pioneer work of Hannah Arendt about these elements, which you find in, I would say, not just in the history of imperialism only, but also in the history of militarism, because the first victim group of the Nazis were the pacifists. Those pacifists who tried to find ways which you can compare to Gandhi's, the credo of non-resistance or non-violent resistance, following Tolstoy's recommendation, but on an organized way. And Gandhi had very close contacts to war resistors, was invited to Austria during the 1920s to a war resistance triennial conference. And actually he gave lectures for pacifists in Switzerland before he went to Italy. And I referred to this in my last lecture, Gandhi and Hitler. But just to finish this intervention of mine, or this part, just to tell you, it's really important, essential to have your own event, educational event or lecture about Gandhi and anti-Semitism, because this is a particular aspect which is so inseparably linked with German fascism that it is quite interesting to see Gandhi's statements. He was against anti-Semitism, as we see, but it's very interesting to go deeper, and this would be another lecture then.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for keeping the flame of our quest burning, and in mutual consultation, we hope to nurture this dialogue. Possibly, I'll have a word with Randhir and our friends, possibly the Sunday of 3rd of October, just after 2nd of October, possibly. So now let us take our conversations forward. So dear friends, we'll try to wrap up by around 5:30 or so. So we have another 20 minutes. In the meantime, I request the following friends to kindly share their thoughts. Payal, Meenakshi, and then Nalini Bhai, Randhir, and Devendra, please. So Payal. Okay, it seems Payal is not here. Then Maruf, please. Maruf. Hello, Maruf Bhai. Okay. Maruf is taking a little time. Minati, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everyone for arranging this another session on Gandhi and Fascism. So I just want to share some of my thoughts. Like I was reading what is the fascism's worldview. So why did they prefer or choose those things to be? I mean, why did they choose that one? So there were some few things which they believed in. That is like the military citizenship. I mean, like some manner they wanted all the citizens to get engaged in the military activities. And they felt that by doing that, they will maintain a stable and orderly society. And they always believed in political violence and war and imperialism as that, like a national rejuvenation, but not that other violence. And they wanted to achieve the perfectionist and interventionist economic political policies. And they also established the racial purity. Doing all these things, I want to know what was how the women view the fascism. I mean, whether they were impacted by Gandhi's speech. I mean, what? So, even though they had so many things like romantic symbolism, I mean, mass mobilization for a positive view of violence, all these things, a promotion of masculinity was there. Still, what did the females, the women view? How did they view it? I want to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minati. As always, your questions are becoming deeper and deeper. That is so inspiring. So now, Randhir, please. Randhir and Devendra.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a kind of thought-provoking session. I wanted to explore a kind of origin of fascism, although we have so many lectures and iron there. But I am trying to understand with Max Weber's perspective of charisma, means how charisma led to the emergence of fascism, or how we can understand fascism. Fascism is a kind of political project only, or as envisioned by Emilio Gentili, fascism as a political religion, particularly in the context of right-wing, new right-wing concept. We can understand the significance of Emilio Gentile conception, or whether fascism is inevitable so far as the modern state is concerned, as envisioned by Terry Eagleton, said fascism is never far beneath the surface of bourgeois democracy. Fascism rather, is essentially the attempt to ensure the rule of monopoly capitalism. And when we understand today's context, particularly in Indian context, the emergence of RSS in terms of how that group, essentialized the idea of Hitler, Nazis, and Mussolini's fascists. So in that sense, how we can understand the source or the origin of fascism, because fascism is deeply connected to the power. The antidote could be maybe Gandhian thought, because Gandhian thought is totally disconnected or try to disconnect from power politics, or until, or how we can essentialize the idea, particularly the idea of dithering away from the idea of a state. Means we can see every form of fascism, particularly after post-independent scenario in India. Almost every government has a kind of different nature of fascism. Some are liberal fascist, some are right-wing fascist, some are left-wing fascist. So how we can, the second question would be the question of solution to this modern form of fascism. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Randhir, words coming out from the depth of truth. And now Devendra, please.
I think he's
Devendra.
traveling. And Devendra
Okay.
is traveling. Okay.
So we are bereft of him quietly. So then Christian, you can kindly reflect on these questions.
Yes, it is one thought referring to art and fascism is if you study the origin of Italian fascism, you see the futurist movement leader Filippo Tommaso Marinetti and his creation of the Manifesto of the Italian Fascists of Combat. And if you want to analyze fascism, then you see the notion of a corporatist system. This corporativism is it's very interesting to study that. Also, this for scientists now, this organization of society by corporate groups such as agricultural, labor, military, business, scientific, or guild associations on the basis of their common interest. This is interesting for us today. Also, as a tool to understand how democracies can be destroyed. Corporate capitalism, corporatocracy, etc. You know all these words, but there should be real science on that. This is important for democracy. This is one thing. And the other thing, referring charisma, yes, no. I just want to remind us that this achievement in art, major achievement in art by Charles Chaplin was to break the charisma of Hitler and Mussolini in his great dictator. And I remember very well how strong the impact on the audience was when Ananta and myself were seeing this. You know, there's something like a key to understand the creation of charisma in Hitler in studying the parody of Chaplin. There is a exhibition now in Vevey at Chaplin's house on the background of this movie at the very moment. But it is so necessary to deal with another very important topic: who created fascism actually? And these were industrialists who sponsored a kind of anti-Bolshevist, anti-communist power group, and tried to organize people to act against and use all the symbols of the Leninists to outnumber them. This is important. It's also linked with the history of the crushing, the destruction of the Munich Revolution in in Germany, for example, in April 1919, when Hitler played his role and also started his career as a spy, a propaganda spy who was built up actually because of his eloquence, of his rhetorics. He was performing in front of mirrors, as we know, through the photographies of Hoffmann. So you see, Hitler was really putting in scene, and he was a performer. Yes, of course, this aspect is important in nowadays age of the media, the mass media, so highly developed beyond the radio of that time, and also beyond the Leni Riefenstahl movies, propaganda movies for the Nazi regime in Germany. So you see this this analysis of political performances is becoming more and more important. Also, the way how new political movements are supported by mass media corporations. So there is so much to be done, but I'm very grateful for you to have an open talk about this. And there should be no, we can say, mental reservations to speak about sensitive subjects, but also there should be sometimes more than a free flow of association, but a deep analysis in the abyss of this political quagmire. And we are, you know, facing similar problems today and same problems. And for me, it is, just to give you one last sentence on that, a very sad experience to see among the member states of the United Nations, so many one-party or two-party systems. Actually, two party is better than one party, of course, but one-party systems or with fake elections. And so this is really hurting. And this shall not be, you know, as a pacifist, I might even dare to say this is not the reason why so many soldiers lost their lives in the combat against fascism, that democracy is constantly compromised, and that there is no world constitution, Charter of Human Rights for each and every one, but there's no real consensus on democratic procedures like elections, but also regulations on mass media, etc. There should be kind of World Federation project coming out of all our discussions, debates and discussions. And this is necessary just to stop this dynastic, corporatist seize of power and capturing democracies for their own privileges. And we should also be aware that in every country there is a danger of human rights violations, particularly in those countries where strong parties are incorporating a kind of, can say, permanent grip on power structures. There should be democratic control of the democratic forces. We shall have this division of power, and we shall have this control and these rules of law which are binding and which are controlled, and also the abolition of those weapons which are exterminating human beings as if they were, you know, insects. So this is important to come to a global approach, not just by appealing from the side of United Nations, but also by reforming the member states of the United Nations.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for this very, very deep invocations. Very, very deep invocations. So, dear friends, we are slowly coming to the final moment. But we cannot finish it without Minati's poems. Minati, you have some poems, a few lines?
Yeah, it is there, but I don't know time. Okay, today I will be presenting something different, not from my writings. I will read out somebody else's poem. So, may I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is the poetry many would have read probably. So that is the poetry from Kumar. That is, there is no country for writers. So I thought it will be very appropriate for this occasion to read. So it goes on like this. Lies emerging from deception, or the hidden beast in things. What strange, terrible experience is the truth? Low-priced religious pamphlets scream. The excessive glories of civilization, the superficial order of ranks and chasm of our languages. Sometimes I crawl on my four legs, studying glossy reports of workers killed in the factories. Erroneous conclusions and false mortality have filled my adulthood with inexplicable sexual fears. Anonymous ascetic liberties of memories are spiritual prisons, and I am not allowed to sin before God. Lacking semantic rigor, unique numeric identifiers of book self-destruct themselves. Pessimistic smile on my face have inhibitory effects on the muscular growth of hermit's writings. This is not something I was hoping for. The advancement of art and literature. Polytheist, monotheist, and infidels tell me there is no country for writers. Writing has become fake, fragile, and questionable. The impossible crime of attractive metaphysicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Minati. Very deep poem. I think Ashwini Kumar, also my friend from Tata Institute.
Yeah. So I read it. I thought it is very good to present. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
And dear friends, we just got a request from Anand, a very dear friend from Pune. He wants to sing a few lines. So with generosity, let us listen to him. Anand. Anand, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान न आने रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे वैष्णव जन तो वैष्णव जन तो वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. You are so kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So now, Randhir, we can.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Christian.
Yes, yes. So, any friends want to share his thought?
But maybe now we can conclude, Randhir. You
Yes.
can kindly say a quick vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir, for this lecture.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So, dear and respected friends, thank you so much for your kind generosity, and it's really inspiring talk. And Dr. Christian Bartolf is a very kind-hearted person. His generosity and his intellectuality is also very significant for us to nurture our Viswanathan Center for Asian Blossoming and SOHSS Chakra. And I extend a very grateful thank to all respected participants who asked very beautiful questions, comments, particularly Gyan Gulai. And last but not the least, I want to say thank you to Maniti Pradhan, Professor Ananta Giri sir, Anandji, who sing so well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Chris.